Good morning. How are you all today? Thanks for joining. My name is Razan from WestTech Technologies. We provide managed IT services, hardware and software across Ireland and the UK. We have a team of 15 and work with businesses of all sizes across various industries, including accountants, airlines, technology, the hospitality sector, and many more. We partner with Microsoft, Dell, Amazon, InShip, and many other well-known businesses. We're proud to be nominated by our customers for 2 awards in the IT industry. And above all, we value customer service excellence and providing powerful solutions to our customers. Today, we're bringing you a demo by InShip, and I'd like to introduce Adrian and Will from InShip now.
Hi, good morning, folks. Roseanne, thanks a million. Good morning, peoples. My name is Will. I'm the Managing Director of InShip, and I'm also joined here today by Adrian Keelahan, who is the founder. Adrian is a qualified accountant by profession and over the years has designed different technology solutions to assist companies improve processes and reduce costs. So we're going to have what we're going to try and do today with the webinar is give you a feel for InShip, what it could potentially do for your business. InShip works with all of the ERP systems, so if you're using Sage or Exchequer or whatever you're using, InShip will work. So let's get over to Adrian. Adrian, where did you get the idea from?
Morning, everyone. Actually, this idea is probably one of the first technology ideas I came across, but took the longest to actually realize. I came across this idea 30 years ago, believe it or not, when I worked in the UK. At that time, I worked for a company that used to supply Tesco's, and we used to have to key in our invoices through a dial-up modem into Tesco's PC. And at that time, we had a couple of people working in accounts, processing our suppliers' invoices, and my dad had a small grocery shop. He used to spend his nights processing suppliers' invoices. And at that point in time, I said there must be a better way of doing it. But then I, being a very progressive person, I parked the idea for 30 years and didn't do anything about it until 5-6 years ago.
Fantastic. So I guess originally you were trying to look at a quick data capture tool, but InShip is much more than just data.
Yeah, when I went out and started actually talking to businesses, as you do when you have an idea like this, you slowly get out there and you talk to loads of people. I started to realize that the way everybody handled invoices and the whole handling of the process was where a lot of time was wasted. And if I sat down and broke it down, and I broke down there was about 10 actions that you have with an invoice when it arrives in the company for manual process. And that's from generating to printing the invoices, to opening the invoices, to sorting them into different bundles, to matching it to this, that, and the other, sending it for one person to approve or 2 people to approve, and data entry, the system verifying the data. You then have to file it in a LeverArch file and then reconcile the invoices. Now, there are 10 steps. Most businesses do at least 8 or 9 of those steps, and some of the steps they do a number of times, as in you might have an approval cycle that you have to put an invoice through. And these are all very important, because what an invoice is once you put it on your system, it's something that's going to actually get paid. So this process is very important to be right. And I sort of said, instead of actually just a quick data tool, we need to basically build a system that automates that process in a very simple way and really only leaves one element of that out, which is really the approval process, which is the click to actually approve the invoice. And the rest basically goes through an automated approval process. So we've turned what's here 9 manual steps, 1 automatic steps, into 4 steps, 3 of which are automatic and 1 is manual. So we switched it around and made it a much quicker and better system to work with. And in doing that, we've saved about 80 to 90% of the processing time.
It's fantastic. I'd say most of the people on the webinar today know the pain of manually processing invoices. So look, we better say, how does the process actually work?
In reality, so this is from developing loads of different systems in the past and looking at different solutions. people look at this as the problem, but when you actually look at the actual thing, the problem is normally much wider. And you have to find the starting point of the problem. The starting point of the problem is not in your company, it's in your supplier's company when they generate and decide to send an invoice to you. And like, we've all been using email for a long time, and that became the obvious technology to work on. So what we do is we sort of say to you, get your suppliers to send their invoices to a dedicated email account, and that can be an in-ship email account, or it can be your own dedicated email account. And we then basically grab the invoices off that and out of that dedicated account, and then automatically process them based on rules that have already been set up.
That's fantastic. And just for the benefit of the audience, I should have said at the start, if anybody has any questions, please use the chat box at the bottom, and I'll be monitoring the questions as they come in so I can relay your questions directly to Adrian. Thanks, Adrian. So look, what happens then when an invoice actually arrives into InShip?
When it actually arrives in, we actually read the invoice 5 times. So we have the first and most reliable method we use is what's reading the metadata from a PDF, a machine-generated PDF document. So what we're doing there is we're actually reading code. We're not actually trying to what's called OCR, or trying to read it and interpret the characters and put them into computer code. We're reading the code first, and we do that for 90% of our invoices. So 90% of the time we're reading code rather than actually trying to read the document. But on top of that, then we OCR the document 4 additional times. And that means that we have different ways we can actually read it, and the best way we grab the data off it. Next, we basically push the invoice through a processing through a processing cycle based on how that supplier is set up, or how the rules have been set up in that company. Otherwise, when a document comes in for the first time and we've never seen it before, it goes into a setup phase. So I'll actually take the main part of the process is actually just approving an invoice, but then there's just before that there's actually setting the document up.
Fantastic. So how then do you actually set up an invoice?
Well, we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. When an invoice comes in that we've not seen before, we have our brain that identifies the key points, and we then highlight them as we have here. We've highlighted invoice number, the date, the purchase order number. At the bottom of the invoice, we would have highlighted the total goods and VAT. We highlight the fact that we know it's an invoice. And what somebody does the first time they see an invoice is they confirm that this information is right. In this particular invoice here, we're also grabbing the address. Why are we grabbing the address? We're grabbing the address so that we can actually apply rules to it. So for example, this might be a company with multiple branches. We work with quite a few multiple retail outlets, and the deliveries going to different branches can then be sent to a district manager to approve, can be sent to the shop to approve, or can even be just sort of still go through the normal approval process, but it's getting different nominal ledger coding on it. We're also grabbing here the line items off an invoice, and that's so that we can watch out for any price increase. So we actually build a product file of everything that's on that invoice without any data entry. We can also code, and I'll show you this in a few minutes, we actually can code an invoice based on a line item, and you can search based on a line item. And you can do quite a lot of things just by the simple fact that the line item here, you actually can double click on a line item within InShip, it will do a Google search for you. So it's actually doing a lot of things. But at the end of the day, as you can see, all it is about drawing a box or dragging a mouse across a specific area. Once you can learn how to do that, you can set up doing a template. And we have loads of different fallbacks in relation to grabbing data. It's just to deal with the fact that there is no rule, unfortunately, on how you put together an invoice. Yeah. They're supposed to be, but no one follows them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we've probably all seen that. And what would happen then if an invoice actually had an issue, a problem with an invoice?
Well, there's a number of issues, like we drag them out. Probably the one that everybody gets is duplicate invoice. So that's where you get an invoice, the supplier sends it in a second time because you haven't paid them on time or they make a mistake. But the great thing about InShip is we take out of the system straight away. It's not, you don't go through the approval process. You're not checking it online or anything like that. We immediately find out, says, hey, we've seen this invoice before. And we actually give you, we put it to a separate part of the system, and we give you a link to its mate. So you can confirm, yeah, we've seen that before. So just delete it, job done. Other ones, like if it's an invoice has an old date, And we sort of say, listen, have a quick look at this. This is an old date. This invoice obviously would go into, because it's an April invoice, and because it's more than 3 months old, it goes in for double checking. Or if some data point is missing, we sort of say, listen, hey, we're missing this particular piece of data. So we grab out any invoices that have problems like that.
That's fantastic. I suppose one of the real challenges and one of the issues with invoicing and processing is the approval and the approving of invoices. How does that work?
Now, in reality, that's where the majority of work is on Inship, is approving invoices. And what we've done in that is we give you a huge amount of information. You don't use it all the time, but it's there to actually help you with your decision-making process when you need to do it. If I just go, like, so we had, before going look at an invoice, we've got 2 real types of invoices within Inship. We've got a PO invoice, i.e. one that you've got a purchase order associated with, and then you've got a non-PO or nominal ledger or service invoice. Like, we work with both types of invoices, and they flow one to the other, but we display slightly different types of information. So if I look at a sort of a non-PO invoice, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm switching around and showing the back of the invoice, the actual invoice. Here I'm showing you that we're basically coding based on line items, and we're actually coding the delivery based on the delivery address because it went to the Dublin store. We're also looking out here for basically price watch. So we're actually showing you where the price is increased on particular items. And we can actually drill down that in different movements on that actual part and actually show you where those prices have changed in the past. And on top of that, again, you can see the back of the invoice, but if you want to, you can actually get a direct link from this invoice to actually the other invoice that had the lower or the other price on it. So everything's linked together. So you can see the screen has a lot of information on it. A lot of the time you're looking at something, I'm quite happy with that, and you're just moving on. So I just clicked on a couple of slides accidentally. And if I go to the next invoice, which is a PO invoice, if I just go to a PO invoice, this is a messy PO invoice. We're just going to tidy it up. It's a 2-page invoice, but we've tidied it up. You can see here there's loads of extra line details. We're now matching the invoice to the GRN. We can add basically predefined comments, which you could have done in the other invoice, or we can add freehand comments to that particular invoice. It's also telling us we've never seen a product before. It's the first time we've seen it. We've also got price watch in this invoice, but in reality, the majority of the time, you're just ticking the invoice and moving on to the next invoice. That's really where the work is. It's actually just ticking the invoice. So you can imagine that can be very fast. And if you have a solid PO system with a GRN system attached, you may make decisions that you don't need to actually see invoices that match the GRN, so you can do a one-click approval of hundreds of invoices in one go. You can also basically put in a routing system. So say this invoice is above £11,000. In some organizations, they'd want that to go to the MD or for somebody else to approve. You've also got price watch running on this, and that could have been sent to somebody because the price increases beyond a certain amount or a certain percentage. Even though you might be having a PO, the PO was generated, there's a lot of organizations that want, hey, no, the price increase above 5%, the MD wants to see the invoice, no matter if purchasing have approved it or not. So all of these features are there. You don't need to use them all the time, but they're there for quick access. And even just to point out this particular invoices on a PO, there's 3 GRNs on that PO, but we're actually linking to all of those GRNs, and you can actually jump from this invoice to the other invoices on that GRN if you're having some problem or something like that.
That's fantastic. So we've captured the invoice, we've processed it, we've got it approved. So what's next when this phase is finished, Adrian? What happens next?
What happens next is the invoice is uploaded to the accounts package, and this I'm not going to really show you anything on this because this is different for each accounts package. We work differently, and we work in accordance to what the accounts package allow you to do on an integration level. So with this particular, with some ones we have diarized uploads, so every night something goes up. We have other ones that basically they're diarized uploads or every hour or every couple of hours. Other ones that you go in and it's a manual, you click one button and it will do an upload of all the invoices in the upload file. We sometimes are pushing the documents over, sometimes not. It all really depends on the system that we're working with. But again, the invoices go into the upload folder, and you may decide that the accounts people, even though this invoice, what you could have is an invoice comes in, it goes to a sales or marketing person for them to approve, and then it goes to upload. And the accounts people just see it at upload. They just throw their eye over it, and they might have a question of, well, why are you spending so much money on webinars or whatever you're spending the money on, and it can come back at that point. It can come back in that point in time.
Okay, so
Not
as we
that you always spend money with or anything like that, I wouldn't say that.
So that's we've talked about invoices, but we don't just handle invoices. There are other documents coming into the building. So what else can you deal with?
InShip is quite a flexible tool, but just to give you some straightforward ideas, first thing I'm just going to box off is credit notes. Obviously, we handle credit notes, which is the opposite of an invoice. But we have a POD, our proof of delivery, our delivery note control, whichever you want to call it, so that we can actually match the invoice to and it's not a line-by-line match, it's actually just a filing match. We can match the invoice to a delivery note, or sometimes that's done. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was actually putting it in place for certificates of conformance or different basic, because especially in big engineering projects, they have to keep a huge amount of paperwork to prove that what they put into the part or into the final part product were the right particular parts. And of course, probably the most obvious one, the unusual one to most organizations would be a statement. So when a statement comes into the system, InShip is reading the date, the invoice number, and its value, and then comparing that against what we've actually against what invoices we've received, and we're linking back and forth between the invoice and the statement. And this is a very powerful tool. Firstly, you're reconciling against invoices that have been sent to you rather than invoices that are actually in your accounts package. So if someone's holding the invoices up, you actually can find the invoices and say, these are all waiting for approval. You would normally have 100% missing invoices if you're reconciling this invoice and this statement to invoices, but this particular time, you know, you have them all, and you can get a report from InShip that will help you with your accruals. And on top of that, probably when you're going through sort of the sales process or whatever, you always are looking for stories. And I always start this one say, I'm always looking for stories. And I always say, this was a great system because this was a great functioning system, because the first time I ever used it in beta, I got my story. I didn't have to wait a long time for it. And I went to a beta company who we worked with at the start. And they were testing the first time that we actually launched this. And I asked them in a meeting that was only supposed to have 2 people in it, but ended up having 10. And I asked them what statement did they want me to reconcile, and they picked a supplier who had a 17-page statement. So you have 17 pages by 50 invoices, so it's a lot of transactions. And I clicked the reconciliation button. My heart was pounding, sweat was pouring off me. Didn't know it was going to work out or not. Grabbed all the invoices, reconciled it perfectly. There was 100% of invoices there. They were really happy with it. I turned to the guy who normally does the reconciliation, who was one of the guys who was supposed to be in the room, and I said to him, how long would that normally take you to do? And he said, I did that yesterday and it took me the whole morning. So the whole morning against 2 minutes. But the real revelation was not that comment, was the comment that came afterwards. And that was from his colleague, and he said, it normally would have taken you longer, because you'd normally be missing 30 or 40 invoices. And that's where you see the power. Because the invoices are going into InShip, because it's a closed loop system, you can always track them. You're never losing them. It's absolutely ideal for that.
Very good. Actually, Barbara, one of our attendees, is obviously listening very carefully. Adrian, she's just asked a very important question. How would I find an invoice I thought I'd lost, or was an invoice that was missing?
She's a little bit of a mind reader, because that's like, I don't know, maybe I plant the thoughts in her mind, but that is actually my next slide. I know that's probably why you dreed me up here. Within InShip, we have a very strong search system. You can search by any of these items here. There's 10 items here: invoice number, date, range, a value range, an invoice number, supplier. You can even search by the email address somebody sent it in, the date you received it. But probably the most powerful thing is you can actually search by a line item. So you can search by a particular line item to find an invoice. And at the same time, like sort of in reality, the majority of people do this search. They search by supplier. They hit the supplier. It gets all the supplier's results. They're looking for the month that the particular invoice is in, and they go straight to that. But you have a report generator when you do a search that allows you to actually get every single line item of those invoices, or just a quick summary of the invoices they have there. So you could have sort of said, I want to do a search of all invoices that are ready to upload. We'll give you a result of that, and you can use that for a different payment report or whatever. So you have a lot of skill and a lot of traceability there. And then there's a second report system that allows you to see where invoices are at the moment. If somebody hasn't approved them, there's an outstanding approval report.
That's great. Adrian, I mentioned at the start that, you know, Inship is capable of dealing with most of the companies out there. Well, we just had a question in, so I'll just ping it to you anyway on integrations. John here is saying most of the systems need to talk to each other. Where does Inship stand with integrations?
Well, it's sort of, it really depends on the system that we're working with. Say, I'm going to throw these off the top of my head, not in any particular order. For example, with Xero, they have open-ended APIs, and Accounts IQ are exactly the same. They have open-ended APIs. What we do is we hook up to their APIs, and we're exchanging. And you put your password in, and you confirm with Xero or Accounts IQ or anyone else who's on an API that you're happy for these two systems to hook up. And we're talking directly to those systems and grabbing the information off those systems in relation to their suppliers' names, your nominal codes, etc., your PO information, your GRN information, and then we push back into that, straight into their system. We push back the information. Other systems, we would have what we call an app, which is a small little program sitting on sitting on people's laptops, and that app acts as an interface between Inship and the accounts package. And then in some sort of other systems, it's just basically a file transfer. We generate a file in exactly the format that system wants it, and the system pulls it in. So it depends on the options that the system is actually that the system is giving us, and we'll work to the best one that we can work to, and we make it as simple as we can.
That's great. Thanks for that, Adrian. Another question: any security issues around Inship?
No, not really. The first thing we do with Inship is we are an online system, and every transaction is basically encrypted between yourself and Inship. However, we actually store Inship over 5 different servers in 5 different locations, and only parts of the information is on each. So if you actually got to where our invoices are, you wouldn't even know who the invoices belong to, because we don't have any company names where the invoices are. So a lot of stuff is split up, and it's not actually possible to actually see what it is, but it's all done. Everything's sitting on the likes of Azure, which is a Microsoft product, or we work with Google or whatever. We're always working with the big companies. I also have a question here. Well, it's just jumped on my screen. I don't know if you sort of spotted it. It's a question in relation to using cost center analysis. Does Inship allow for that? It's up to 3 additional fields. Yes, Inship is flexible. It can take additional fields, so we could talk to them about that. On top of that, we do use cost centers. Cost centers is, I normally don't bring it up because your sentence gets long, and if you say cost centers, somebody says their departments, and somebody else says their branches, and someone else says their depots. But subcategories, yes, we can handle them, and we can handle. We can probably handle 3 or 4, but it's standard for us to handle 1 or 2. Okay. So you can have a cost center department and then a nominal code. It's not unusual for that to be the case.
That's fine. And for Clara and for anyone else, if there's questions there that we're not dealing with, we will follow up later on after the webinar, and we will give Clara a more defined answer also. Just in terms of the, let's see, I've got a number of questions here. How does the Inship support work?
Basically, sort of what we do, like we have a number of bespoke reports. A lot of reports are about where invoices are sitting in the system at this moment in time. But all the reports, like that report, the statement reconciliation report, your report from your search criteria, they all actually produce in a CSV manner, which accountants are used to. That's going into Excel, and they can manipulate them the way they want to. And like what we try and do is we try and dump as much information that we can onto it. So you're not missing something that you need, and if we're ever missing stuff on those reports, we're quite happy to add.
That's fantastic. We must have really impressed Kate, because Kate wants to know about the onboarding and training.
Yeah, basically, sort of how the onboarding works. It is a handover. It's not, you don't get the package. It's not thrown on you. You will be given a customer support person who will work directly with yourself. We've nearly 50 videos that we have in the system, a full manual. But how the process works is we get you to send in, we set you up, we get your nominal codes, etc. We get you to send in a few invoices. We set them up and we show you how that system works, but we do it bit by bit. We do everything by Zoom, and we record all our training sessions with you. But what we normally do is listen, we're going to do a quick half-an-hour training session on this aspect of InShip. Can you look at this video before we do it? And it means that when we're doing the training session, you know what the training session is going to cover. So your questions are very intelligent. Your questions are based around the information that that's normally specific to your organization. And at the end of that, as I said, that training session is videoed, and you actually get a copy of that, so you can pass it on to yourself and subsequent people in your organization. But after the training and the onboarding process is done, we've set up a lot of the templates for you. After that is actually done, we're always there for you. We're software as a service. There's a ticket support system there to let us, if you have a problem with an invoice, let us know what invoice you're having a problem with. We look at it. Or if you're having any issues at all, like you'll always have a contact with an InShip to try and help you through that process.
That's fantastic. And I suppose a complementary or supplementary question on that is, how long would it take to go live?
It really depends on the organization, but it's normally a number of weeks, if not a month or two. But if you're a large organization, it can take a little bit longer because of training and you're looking for specific items. But we've taken people on board in less than a day, and we've other people that's taken 4 months, but they're normally quite complicated projects, and we're doing special things for them at that piece. But I know that's a very sort of non-answer, but take it as a month would probably be a good, unless you have a lot of strange things, take it as a month.
Okay, I'm just conscious of the clock, Adrian, so we're approaching the end, but I do want to get to a question that somebody has asked, and I suppose it's raising this whole, we're all in a new environment now with COVID, and the questions is centering really around the fact that the accounts people are working from home, or there's alternative days where people are coming in and out. So how would InShip help in that kind of environment? And I think a lot of the companies now are finding themselves in this kind of a situation. And I suppose the one thing that jumps at me is approvals, for example, would be very difficult if people are not in the office as often as perhaps they used to be.
Yeah, no, InShip is really great for that. In some respects, you could say it's built for that. And we didn't build it for COVID. We built it way beforehand. Firstly, the first thing we did, it's not an application. It sits on your browser. So all you need is Chrome and Safari or whatever, and you get InShip through that. And you can actually approve invoices from a mobile phone. So in reality, your invoices are in one location. You're not worried about people taking them home and breaking GDPR by taking paper all over the place. It's in a controlled environment. They've only got passwords. Everything's audited, so we know what people are doing and approving, etc., etc. So it's unfortunately or fortunately, it's good for the current environment.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay.
And as well as that, you're not touching the paper, but I don't think that's a major issue. And now we know that touching things is not as much of a problem.
So it's totally
paper that might be a few days old, but like there's a lot of advantages in doing it this way.
So InShip it's totally in the cloud now. It's a
100% in the cloud, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, look, we said we keep it tight, and people need to crack on and get back to work, etc. So I think we've addressed, let me just final check on the, Yeah. Okay. So look, we've captured most of the questions there. As I said, we haven't dealt with something. We will follow up afterwards. We will be sending a copy of the webinar out to the attendees so they have something to reference back to, and we'll follow up with them, and we'll send a follow-up email. I would like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank WestTech, and I would like to thank the clients for attending the webinar today. Roseanne, I don't know if you want to say something to your guests before we wrap it up. Adrian, I'd like to thank you also. And again, thank you, everybody. Roseanne, I'll leave it over to you.
Hi, how are you? Thanks a million for joining today, and great information from the guys there. It's a really good system, especially with the new work from anywhere that everybody's doing at the moment. So thanks for joining today. Maybe check out our new website. We've just launched it, and a new online tech shop as well. So yeah, let us know if you need anything in the IT sector, of managed IT hardware, software, and basically bespoke services or anything else that you need.